You're listening to The Bird Bath. This episode of The Bird Bath is brought to you by PassPaw. Pet travel paperwork is time-consuming, complicated, and honestly, most practices aren't getting paid what it's worth. PassPaw fixes that. Use PassPaw's software to save your vet's precious time or go full concierge so your team stays focused on the medicine and let PassPaw handle the back and forth. Every workflow is optimized so your time is actually compensated, and when things get complicated, there's a real, experienced team ready to help. PassPaw, built for practices that take pet travel seriously. Visit PassPaw.com, that's PassPaw.com, and use the code BIRDBATH for a special offer. Welcome back to the Bird Bath. Each week we scrape the surface of the news you need to know, so let's get into it. Top story this week is coming to us from overseas, but actually this week it's like all top stories, so lots of really good stuff to dig into this week. But the big news from Europe is Medivet has announced the sale of its Spanish practices to VetPartners. VetPartners is a large group in Europe, and Medivet is also a large group in Europe. And the deal here is involving 50 of the locations that Medivet owns across all of Spain, and they're fully divesting those to sell them to VetPartners. Now, this is a pretty big move. It's about 10% of Medivet's total practices across the market. Now they'll primarily have 350 or so practices just in the UK, a small count in Germany, but this is a pretty big divestment from the group. And it's been particularly interesting because of a lot of the other things that we're seeing across the UK market. Medivet's CEO, Neil Lake, said, "We believe the future of veterinary care is locally empowered, partnership-led practices operating within a strong, trusted national brand." So with that, Medivet did some announcements earlier this year, end of last year, about how they want to have the majority, if not all of their practices, having a partnership model where the veterinarians in those clinics are also part owners of those practices. It makes sense here. You're going to see that they have more capital to be able to acquire more practices. And by having doctors in the clinics as partners, you're going to be able to kind of change what some of those fundamental costs are across the board. Now, this means big things as well for VetPartners. VetPartners should be swelling to over 900 practices across Europe when the deal closes. It does still need to be approved by the Spanish regulatory boards, but should all of this come together, we're going to be seeing another big thing changing in the European market. We don't have to, consistently talk about the CMA and the things that are going on, but earlier this year, not even that long ago, a couple months ago, we saw CVS Group, which is one of the largest players in the space, talk about pausing their acquisitions in the UK market as things were sort of settling. Medivet obviously is looking at it very differently. They're going harder into the market. And CVS Group is taking over $100 million or 100 million pounds of capital and deploying that in Australia. So very different ways to look at this market, but big things across the board for a lot of the groups there. Now, here on the home front, we've got some changes in who is going to be bringing new universities. Midwestern University has announced that they're going to be pausing their Illinois vet school. Midwestern put out a press release announcing a strategic realignment, which included pausing further action on the proposed Chicago College of Veterinary Medicine at their Downers Grove, Illinois campus. They had already started some of the accreditation process, they had started some of the development, and they have put that on hold. They're citing infrastructure, clinical capacity, and financial commitments of standing up a second 4-year DVM program as the reasoning behind this. They do still have their Arizona veterinary program, and it sounds like from what they've said that nothing should be affected there, and they should actually be looking to hopefully reallocate some of the capital that was set aside for the Chicago campus towards the growth that they want to see in Arizona. It's still a fairly new school. It's not as new as the University of Arizona there, but it opened in 2014. Their first class graduated there in 2018, and they're graduating about 100 to 135 students. So this was one that people were sort of expecting to see, right? A college or a university that's already built a college, already brought one through the accreditation process, but they decided no matter the fact that they had crossed the Board of Higher Education and were in preliminary COE accreditation discussions, it was not the right move for their team. Now, this isn't the only school that was in this big wave of new veterinary colleges coming on. Since 2013, we've seen Marshall in West Virginia announce that they're not going to be opening, Chamberlain in Georgia, Hanover College in Indianapolis in 2025, and now the fourth one here for Midwestern in 2026. So still a lot of universities that are planning to open, but I cannot imagine that this will be the last story we have about one of these proposed colleges, maybe not bringing it all the way to the finish line. A new round of congratulations are needed for the team at Zoetis. After a tough quarter and some needs to shake things up, they have elevated an incredible person on their team, Abhay Nayak, who was leading their global diagnostics division, to now be the executive vice president and president of U.S. commercial operations. He's now on their executive team, and he's going to be really, hopefully, trying to target some transitions and some changes that they've seen here. Jamie Brannon, who's the chief commercial officer at Zoetis, as well as Kristen Peck, the CEO, announced this big new move. Abhay has been sort of a forefront leader in a lot of the changes that Zoetis is doing on their diagnostic portfolio. And hopefully some of the lightning that they've struck there is going to be brought into the commercial operations in the US. They had a tough last quarter and a tough reporting on the previous year on some of the difficulties around the new drugs and the competition there. But the diagnostic business has continued to be a bright light. We saw IDEXX seeing major growth continuing to happen, primarily around their diagnostic business. So the move of bringing Abhay to the forefront of the team here makes a ton of sense. So congratulations on the new role, and I look forward to seeing where this takes the Zoetis team next. Veterinarians in Florida should be expecting some changes around their laws governing how they can sell and sort of bring prescriptions into the client's hands. The new law takes effect on July 1st, and it was signed into law just last month by Governor Rick DeSantis. So the new law here is going to kind of open up the door or sort of demystify some of the things that we've seen happening already. The law is targeting, and the unanimously voted on law, I think is an important thing to think about here. But the goal here is for the veterinary clinics to be required in writing and in notices to let their clients know that they have the ability to take a prescription from the clinic and have it filled externally to the clinic. Now, if you think, okay, so what? Well, this was actually a big part of, going back to our UK thing, this is a big part of the CMA laws that we saw come into play in the UK market, and Florida coming and stepping in saying, hey, you can't sort of pigeonhole the clients to need to purchase prescriptions directly from the clinic. So with this new law, the clients are given and sign an acknowledgement form that has to be substantially to these terms. I'm going to read it exactly. It's called the Acknowledgement of Ability to Receive Written Prescription. I, name of the client, understand the veterinary client's right to receive a written prescription for the medication that can be filled by the pharmacy of my choice or my veterinarian as provided in Statute 474.224 Florida statutes. The client then signs and dates that. They have to get that. They can put it, they only have to sign it once and it goes into the medical record, but it is something that lets them know point blank, hey, we will hand you a prescription or we will do e-scripting. An online prescription also falls under the same law. It makes it so that they have to be very clear about what's on there. if they were to change any of the wording, they may not make a statement, notification, warning, or assumption regarding the efficacy or safety of filling a prescription through an outside pharmacy. Basically, you can't say, hey, here's the form, but by the way, if you go to Chewy, it's not going to be as good as it is here. So they also need to put up signage, and it has to say, Florida law gives the veterinary clients, it needs to be clear and conspicuous signage near the point of sale, and it needs to tell them that Florida law gives the clients the option to have their prescription filled externally, and that they also can be given a written prescription to fill at the pharmacy of their choice. There's two cutouts for this, right? If there's an emergency and immediate dispensing is needed to preserve life or prevent suffering, or for controlled substances. Now, in the bill, what's not in there, there's no penalties or enforcement mechanisms. It would go under the same disciplinary framework that other veterinary laws are enforced. And there's also no pricing disclosure requirements. This is a pretty big deal and a pretty big law that I'm going to be interested to see. And I would not doubt that we're going to see other states and maybe countrywide adopting a framework like this, right? We've seen already that the pharmacy is being taken out of the clinic in many situations, and this is now a sign at checkout telling you that you can take your pharmacy out of the clinic. It's also now some teeth and some law around some of the different pharmacy revenue that is leaving and making it so that it's not as kind of slow play or ambiguous as some people might have found previously. So big things here. Chewy announced their quarterly earnings report, and I think over 84% of their net sales is coming from auto ship. And when they know, they stay there, they stick around, and it's something that's going to be interesting. And Chewy has practices in Florida. There's a ton of big practices in Florida. So if you don't have this in your game plan of how you want to tackle this, now is the time to jump up and make sure that you're ready for this, not only in Florida, but across the country. Finally, there's a new player in the CE land, and this is a big one because this is the conversation around vet care and pet care. SuperZoo, which is North America's largest pet retail trade show, right? This is where people are going and buying the newest Kong toys or leashes and harnesses and dog beds and all of the things that encompass pet care. The team at SuperZoo is launching their accredited veterinary CE for the first time. This is a big one. This is one I wish I was doing live because I'd say, how many veterinarians have been to SuperZoo? And I bet it's a very low number. But now that you can get CE at this large show, you're starting to see this blending of vet care and pet care coming together. And it's not something where we're seeing the veterinarian side of things open up the door to more pet care folks. It's the largest pet retail trade show saying to vets, come here, shop, and also get your CE. They've partnered up with the US Vet Shows, which is the team behind New York Vet and Wild West Vets. They're a partner as well and part of the parent company that also runs the London Vet Show and a ton of other events in the space. So August of this year, the CE is going to be available for veterinarians to go to SuperZoo in Vegas, right in the backyard at the same place, the Mandalay Bay, that so many of you go to every year. And you're going to now have the opportunity to get CE. So it's another big one. This is one that I think is kind of a big shot across the bow because sure, people are interested in going to CE events and maybe walking the expo hall and talking about the newest software, but I can tell you there's a whole lot more fun stuff to shop for at SuperZoo. There's a lot bigger exhibits, there's more pets, and there's a lot more interactive. So I'm going to be really interested to see where this goes for the team at SuperZoo, how this grows with the US Vet Show, what they're doing around Wild West Vet in Reno, and even more. So this is going to be a big one to keep your eye on. So lots and lots of big stories this week. It's definitely something that I think we've got a lot to be thinking about. Now, on this week's breakdown on the Substack, we're going to be digging a bit more into the Catalyst Council's report on what they're calling the Popcalypse and the growth of cats, which obviously the Catalyst Council is going to be telling us about the growth of kittens in the space. But if you want to hear about more of these and other stories, you can join by subscribing to our Substack. There's always a link in the bio. And don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing and rating the show. For The Bird Bath, I'm Ryan Leach. See you next week.